Hello nice people and welcome to the Red Cyberglass. If we don't know each other, well, welcome, my name is Andrea, I'm Italian, I'm a passionate videographer and photographer, and I'm here today to explain to you what is frame rate. So before we start, let me give you a little bit of context. If you are on your way of learning how to use a camera to make videos, I recommend you to check out my channel page. And maybe you want to subscribe if you want to keep updated along the path with all the contents I publish. Because in there you will find all the tutorials, contents, and videos concerning this beautiful art and craft. Okay, so just if you want to check it out, it's there, it's free. You can do whatever you want. And now let's talk about frame rate. So we said frame rate. So to be very clear and simple, frame rate is the frequency of the frames, so still images captured by your camera for each single second. So to understand a little bit better this concept, if you go back in time, in the beginning of the past century, at the beginning of the cinema era, if you remember the black and white movies with Charlie Chaplin, remember that the images, the movement of the actors were quite scattered. There was something like, that jerky feel. That was because at that stage cameras were able to capture something like only 7 frames per second. So literally was capturing images after images after image after image after image 7 times per second, and then putting together in the film and make them scrolling through the projector. That was the movie actually. So nowadays we don't have films any longer, we have digital cameras, and despite we don't have film, cameras still apply the same principles as it was at the beginning. So cameras still record sort of still images for each single second. So frame rate is also frame per second. So how many still images your camera is capturing for every single second. So what do you have in your camera and what you are supposed to choose between your options? So after you have set your camera with the right system frequency, so as we already said in another video, link here, you have options of NTSC system frequency or PAL system frequency. After you selected the one of the two, it belongs to your region, then you can select the frame rate. So let's go for instance in NTSC, so in that system frequency format. In there you have three main actually options for the frame rate. So usually you have 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second. Let's start from 24 frames per second. That's the standard for cinema. That's the look you have if you want to have a cinematic video. So if you watch series, big productions like Game of Thrones, for instance, but all the other big production at the cinema or on Netflix and then HBO, all that kind of stuff, they are all shooted and projected in 24 frames per second. And that's the cinematic look that you have in movement, in the action, etc. Television is a different story. They shoot mainly in 30 frames per second. So that broadcast news look or sitcom or TV shows, they are most of all recorded and shooted in 30 frames per second. So you can understand the look. Comparing the two, the look is quite different. On one side you have cinematic look, that's the standard since like I think 80 years, 60 years. On the other side, the standard is a little bit more realistic and yeah, it's difficult to describe. They're just different. Then we have a third option. The third option is the 60 frames per second. 60 frames per second is mainly used when you want to use that specific clip to be in post-production, slow it down, so to have a slow motion basically. Because having 60 frames per second, you have so many frames in a second that when you go in post to slow down your images, your sequences, you have that buttery and silky smooth movements. So that's mainly the reason why you should select the 60 frames per second, in case you want to have the slow motion at the end. Of course, you can shoot your entire video in 60 frames per second. everything, and then in post-production export everything in 24 frames per second, so that you have anyway a cinematic look. But this is something you can start to learn afterwards. So for the moment, you are taking your camera for the first time, just remember that you have these three different options. So cinematic look, television look, and slow motion for the 60 frames per second. There are cameras that can hold even higher frame rate, so 120, 180, and of course there the slow motion will be even much more slower and smooth and silky and buttery than the 60. But most of the time when you go so high with the frame rate, you need to have compromises in terms of resolution. So my camera, for instance, can't shoot a 4K at 120 or 180 frames per second. I need to shoot in 1080p. So if I want to shoot with that frame rate, I need to have compromise in terms of resolution. So for the PAL system, actually the PAL system has only two main options. You have the 25 frames per second and 50 frames per second. So you don't have much choice there. And indeed, the television in Europe, in Italy, is mainly recorded using 25 frames per second. So you use the 50 frames per second only when you want to have some more frames to do the slow motion. That's it. Okay guys, that's all for today. I hope now that frame rate concept is quite clear. In case it's not, you have doubt, questions, other stuff, write them down below in the comments and I will answer for certain. Alright? That's it. Thank you very much for watching. I wish you all the best. I wish you a great day and I will see you, hopefully, into the next video. Cheers!